Fantastic. So hello, if you've just joined us, hello and welcome to this session. I'm Jo Gore, and I'm in Barcelona today, and I'm joined by Anestin Chi. Hi, Anestin, how are you?
Hi, John. I'm fine, thank you. And I hope you too.
Where are you joining us from today?
Oh, from Bamenda, it's in Cameroon, and it's a bright day, bright afternoon. And I'm happy to have all the teachers from Egypt, Algeria, Syria, and I see so many countries. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we're very happy to have you. So
Thank
before I
you.
hand over to you, I'll just introduce you and tell them a little bit about you. So Anestin Chi is a multi-award-winning English and French language teacher from Cameroon, as she said. She's also a British Council certified trainer and language consultant. Ernestine is passionate about innovative teaching methodologies, for example, using emojis to support writing. And she's also passionate about teachers' professional development. So we're delighted to have you with us today. I'll hand over to you now so you can share your slides with people. And I'll turn my camera off, but I'm here if you need me, okay?
Thank you so much, Joanne.
Enjoy the session.
So, thank you. So, hello and welcome, everyone. Great, I think we are there. Wonderful. So welcome once again. I'm Anestin and I'm so happy to meet you in this conversation. I'd like us to talk about leveraging emojis to develop writing skills. Is it possible? So in this session, we are going to look at two things. First, we'll look at the rationale for using emojis in teaching, and then we'll briefly discuss the emoji module which I developed. And in the second part, we'll look at practical ideas and sample activities which you can replicate in your own classrooms. So let's get started. So teaching writing in foreign language classes remains very challenging, probably because it involves a number of metacognitive and cognitive activities. In an action research study which I did, my learners said writing was complex, boring, and sometimes teachers do not teach writing, they merely evaluate, which makes it quite abstract and challenging. Also, a good number of studies have shown that visuals are essential for teaching and learning and facilitate comprehension. Other studies prove that mobile assisted language learning tools, such as phones and everything we can find on in the phones, are gaining attention within the educational sector. And so too is the wide use of pictographs, the case of emojis in electronic messages, which is what we will be looking at today. So our session builds on ideas of using visuals to support teaching and learning and explores the impact of using emojis in writing lessons. So it is with this understanding that we develop a 5-unit module. So in Unit 1, Introduction to Emojis, sentence constructions based on emojis, emojis towards paragraph development, emoji chain stories, and emoji text connection. I like to quickly mention that we are presenting these in terms of units and not in terms of weeks, because the situations will vary from context to context. So while in one context, a teacher might spend a week or two on a unit, in other contexts, depending on learner's level, it's going to be longer. So we will advise moving progressively based on your individual circumstances. The good news is this can be used with young, teenage, and even adult learners, and it's suitable for low proficiency learners as well as intermediate level learners. So in developing this model, we took into account a number of factors. mainly the writing, the sub-writing skills. So if you look at the image on the slide, you will see the various writing skills or sub-writing skills that the skills, sub-writing skills which we need to consider when teaching writing. And in developing this module, we took that into account. So introduction to emojis caters for vocabulary development. Here we pay attention to use of the vocabulary, developing the learner's repertoire using synonyms, antonyms, and even collocations. Unit 2 caters for sentence structure. So in this unit, we look at how to move from simple sentences to compound complex and compound complex sentences. In Unit 3, which is paragraph development, we look at different types of write-ups, so descriptive, narrative, dialogic, but also how to move from the topic sentence through the supporting sentences and concluding sentences and build transitions. And in Unit 4, which is emoji chain stories, we take into account creativity and originality. How do we spur learners' creativity, which is important in writing? And then Unit 5 takes care of cohesion. So emoji text connection will look at things related to logical order, unity, and clarity of text. And you would agree with me that issues of grammar and mechanics will run from the introduction to emojis, where we look at spelling, punctuation, and as we progress. So it runs through from the Unit 1 to Unit 5. Great. So that was a bit of theory. Now let's look at it practically. What are some activities? We will start off with Unit 1. So introduction to emojis. Here we said the focus is on building, developing learners' vocabulary. So we want to expand their vocabulary repertoire. So for low-level learners, a sample activity I recommend is giving the learners emojis and asking them to write a word or two to describe the emoji. So they will need to look at the emojis and then think of the words they could write that describe the emojis. This will help them expand their repertoire. So I'd like you to just quickly glance through the emojis and see which one and which word you could write. So since this is very basic, we're going to move forward, but I'd like to show some responses from my learners. So these are my grade 8 learners. So these are some of the emojis they picked out and they wrote words. You would notice the strike throughs and the red ink imply error correction. Yeah. Another activity, or before we talk about another activity, let me quickly find out from you, what will be your rationale for doing the activity we just saw? So I'm happy. Okay. Anita says emoji generation, vocabulary generation. Monse says elicitation, great, wonderful. Courage says vocabulary building. Kiloro says expression, great. Wonderful, so many nice answers. So let's move on to another activity we could do. So I would recommend having an understanding, the same understanding of emojis in the classroom so that we could move in the same direction. So my second recommendation would be getting the learners to compare emojis that look similar so that they can reflect on the similarities and differences, taking into account meaning and usage. So on this slide, you see some emojis. If we look at the first one, my learners say these emojis could be used to indicate happiness, but the first one is used when something is very hilarious, so you have to laugh out loud. The second one may be just for a smile. If we look at the second categories of emojis, My learners say they depict sadness, but the first one implies that you are extremely angry, and then the second one, maybe you're just angry, but not very angry. And then the third category, my learners say you could use both to imply peace. But the first will be used to say hello to a friend, while the second will be used to signify togetherness, so meaning someone is your buddy. And then the last category, of course, there are many more. We looked at quite a good numbers, but for the sake of time, I'm showing you just these four. They said the last one could be used for silence, but the first one will mean that you are requesting someone to keep quiet, while the second one will mean you want to keep quiet. So it's kind of self-imposed silence. So do you agree with these differences? So Maria says yes, Sadia says yes, Asma says yes, Anita says yes, Great Courage says yes. Thank you, very nice answers. Now, so why would you want them to reflect on these differences? I think that is important. Why would you want them to reflect on the differences? What would be your rationale for having them do the reflection? Okay. Claire says expression. Katuna says understanding. Kelly says show richness of English. Zami says check their understanding. Great. And it is good that the whole class has the same understanding of the emojis before you move on to complex tasks. Now, another activity I would recommend is have learners guess vocabulary from context. So here's a sample text. It looks more like a reading activity. Of course, we are dealing with integrated skills, so we can't teach one skill without teaching the other. There's no way you teach writing without some bit of speaking or reading. So yeah, the goal is to get the learners to learn new vocabulary and to be able to remember the vocabulary with the help of emojis. So on this slide, I've got a text. If we look at the sentences with the keywords, she had headache and felt dizzy. So my learners will remember dizzy because they see the emoji with the spiral eyes. After reflecting for some time, they will remember reflecting because they can link reflecting to this emoji, which to them they say it's thinking. And then she decided to go to school because she had to take an exam. They will remember the expression take an exam because they can link it to the hand holding the pen. The text continues. So at school, Moon was unusually silent and kept yawning. So my learners can establish the link between the emoji for yawning and would remember the meaning of yawning. So I remember a learner told me it's breathing with your mouth open and also trying to close your mouth using your hand. And then they will remember the teacher granted. So the expression granted, they know it's accepted because they can relate to the tick. And she was so elated. So they will remember the meaning of the expression elated because they see this smiley face, then they know this will mean happy. And the last one, dress. My learners now are able to distinguish between different types of clothes. So they know this one is a dress. The first one is a dress, the other one top, and then pants. So this is another activity I would recommend for building their vocabulary. Great. I know some people will be saying these are very basic activities, so my learners, I would not need unit 1. Maybe Anestin should just go to unit 2. But if you've got B1 plus learners, then you may do for unit 1 activities on synonyms, antonyms, and collocations. So let's look at some samples. So you give your learners some emojis and then you ask them to generate synonyms and antonyms and collocations for the emojis. So this is an example. I started off by saying, by discussing, so we had a whole class session brainstorming, what do these emojis represent? So they said rain, happy, launch, and wave. Now for each emoji, they have to develop synonyms in groups, antonyms, collocations, and also use the vocabulary in sentences. So let's look at some examples. Let's take the case of rain, for example. So my learners brainstorm, and with the help of dictionaries, because this is grade 10, 11, they come up with this vocabulary: drizzle, downpour, shower. Antonyms, they've got things like sunshine, drought, dry, arid, and then collocations. You can see collocations, I beg your pardon. So heavy rain, light rain, torrential rain, rain pours, rain stops, rain cloud, rain forecast, rain shower. And I don't just ask them to look for these synonyms, antonyms, and collocations, but they also use them to construct in sentences. So you see the example for the synonym: the downpour soaked everyone on the street. Antonym: after weeks of drought, the rain was a welcome sight. And collocation: we went out for a hike despite the forecast of torrential rain. So let's try another example, this time around with launch. So what synonyms did my learners get? So begin, initiate, propel, set off, start. And then for antonyms, end, halt, cease, terminate, stop. Collocations: launch a campaign, launch a business, launch a product, launch an idea, launch into space. And again, they don't just have to generate this vocabulary, they actually need to use the vocabulary in sentences. So this is how we can use emojis to help learners learn the new vocabulary, but also to expand their vocabulary repertoire by looking for synonyms, antonyms, collocations, and actually using them in sentences. So far, do you think your learners will enjoy these vocabulary building activities we've seen in Unit 1? Okay, Shakira says definitely. Lubna says surely. Juliana says sure. Anna says of course. Monica says definitely. Marilu definitely. Great, wonderful. So let's move to Unit 2. Unit 2 is about sentence construction. And here we are looking at how to get learners to write simple sentences, expand to compound sentences, complex sentences, and eventually compound complex, depending on their level and proficiency. So again, an activity I could recommend is giving learners for maybe A1, A2 learners, give them a set of emojis and ask them to write short sentences to describe circumstances under which they will perform actions depicted by these emojis. So could you share some example sentences in the chat? Maybe you choose an emoji and write just one sentence, please. Okay. Okay, I see some example. Okay, Shakia says, oh my God. Kelly says, the man ran away from the dog. Shakira says, oh my God. Claire says, I love jogging. Moshira says, happy. Maria says, oh my God. Beatrice says, in the exam. And then, yeah, Monte says, we have an exam tomorrow. Quite interesting answers. So let me share with you examples from my classrooms. So in one of my classrooms, some learners wrote this. So I won't read because we can clearly see, I guess. Or maybe I read just a few. So I clap when someone does something good. I am happy when I receive good news. I put on sunglasses when I go for a picnic. I laugh when I listen to a funny story. In another class, I had this. So I cry when someone dies. I run when I'm in danger. I run when I am late. So this is one activity you could give learners. But also learners will not just end at writing simple sentences or subject, verb, object. They need to expand. So how do we get them to write varieties of sentences? So we could give them emojis and ask them to write simple sentences to describe the emojis. Then expand those simple sentences by using adjectives and adverbs for low-level learners, maybe A1, A2. And then for the B1, B2, we could ask them to add conjunctions, which will mean they will have to answer questions like how or why. So, of course, how to explain the manner, the why, give the reason. So in doing so, they expand and can use conjunctions to link the ideas. So on this slide, I've got a number of samples. First, I'm going to show you simple sentences, and then I will ask you to pick up a simple sentence and try expanding. Let's see what answers we come up with. So we've got a number of simple sentences. Let's try expanding using adjectives, adverbs, and conjunctions. The dog barked when he noticed a suspicious man approaching the house. Great, that is from Panagotis. Well done. Okay, 10 says, my great day starts with drinking coffee. Lovely. Herinu says she slowly drank her coffee in the morning. Excellent. Pio says, I'm okay with everything. Oh no, I don't think that's an example. Okay. Terim says the dog barked with excitement. Kiloro says he is reading a book while cooking. Excellent. And then Katuna says, my hobbies are reading books, running, drinking. Muhammad says he's reading a scary book. So great, well done. So let's look at some examples. So for A1, A2 learners, if they say the small spotted dog barked loudly, that is enough. But for my B1, B2 learners, I want them to expand. So I will ask them to ask how to add questions or responses to how, why, when. So they might add as it saw a stranger approach the gate. So A1, A2, if they write something like she drank warm coffee slowly, that will be fine. But for B1, B2, I want them to provide a reason or explain more. So savoring the rich aroma so that she could feel warm. So here we can see the adverbs in green color, adjectives in blue, and then conjunctions in pink. So we see how the learners expand the sentences. He is carefully cooking a delicious meal. That is okay for A1, A2, but above that, I would need a reason so that everyone can enjoy a wonderful dinner. He is reading a thick old book. That's okay for A1, A2. Above that, I want them to expand while sipping warm coffee. So yeah, other examples. Again, let me see how you're going to expand these ones. Okay, Pio says after reading a book, he felt sleepy. I guess that was for the previous slide. Okay, Kelly says we gather around the fire to keep ourselves warm in the cold, dark night. Great. Bethan says, Pio says, when mom is cooking a delicious meal. So that says, after traveling for a while, I was tired. Great. Yeah, Changes says they are traveling by plane because it's faster than train. Maria says they are traveling to Rio. Okay. So great answers there. Thank you for sharing. Let's see some examples from my own classroom. So they are traveling to new and exotic places, and they look forward to trying new dishes and meeting people. We happily gathered round the cracking fire to tell stories, and although it was chilly, we felt warm and relaxed. I am joyfully celebrating my birthday despite the many challenges I faced this year. And then the last one, he sang a soulful melody with a very enticing voice, and the music filled the venue with calm energy. So great. How will you handle feedback for this activity? It's good to think about having the learners to expand, but how will you manage feedback? Will you do have peer correction, direct feedback? How will you manage that? Let's see some ideas. Okay, so people stay saying awesome. Okay, Hattie says peer feedback, great. So maybe peers give feedback with emojis. Wonderful, that's from Kelly. Angel says, okay, they give feedback with another emoji. Hirono says, I will provide examples of synonyms in case they are lost. Okay, Masud says with stickers. So great. Depending on the level, we could give peer feedback. We could have the learners give peer feedback. We could also step in to give direct feedback to learners. So well done. Now let's move on to the third unit, which deals with paragraph development. And here we are not just looking at how to use the sentences to build paragraph, but we also introducing different types of writing. So descriptive, narrative, dialogic, because in my context, learners are expected in the exam to write either a descriptive essay, a narrative essay, or a dialogue, a conversation. So it's important that we take all those into consideration. So a sample activity for a descriptive kind of writing, you could give images to learners and then ask them to write a short paragraph based on one of the emojis. So here's a sample. I'd like you to think, what short descriptive paragraph could you write with this emoji? Of course, I do not expect you to type your answers in the chat because it's going to be long to type a paragraph, but maybe just brainstorm what sort of paragraph could you write? So here's a sample from my classroom. Elena says, I like a red dress, but I don't like a dress without sleeves. I don't like short dresses too. My mother advised that I don't wear short dress. Again, strike through and red ink, error correction, but notice how minimal the correction is because these are low-level learners and I do not want to discourage them. So I focus on what impedes communication and grammatical errors at this stage, not so much on syntax. And then look at another sample from another learner. My mother bought me a beautiful blue dress for Christmas. I like the dress. The color is very attractive. All my friends like the color of my dress. Again, strike through red ink error correction, but very minimal error correction. And then that was for descriptive. So remember we said descriptive, narrative. Another activity, you could give them an emoji and then ask them to write a story, a paragraph about the story. So they might not write the full story, but just a paragraph. So I'd like you to look at this princess image and think of a story you could write. So again, you do not need to share anything in the chat, just brainstorm and see if uh, an idea could pop up in your mind. So here's a sample from my learners. So Elena wrote, every year the Ministry of Culture organizes a Miss Cameroon contest. Beautiful girls are selected from all 10 regions. The girls do many activities and people vote the most beautiful and intelligent girl. She receives a crown from the First Lady, Madame Chantal Biya. So again, strike through red ink, error correction, but very minimal. So I did not focus on syntax, just communication and grammar mechanics. Now, What are your thoughts about these activities? I just showed you two activities, one descriptive and one narrative. What do you think about them? Okay, Kelly says great fun. Awa says superb. Sido says wonderful. Asma says interesting. Lugna says excellent. Katuro says it was so informative. Maria says it's fun and engaging. Great, wonderful. So what types of errors would you focus on at the feedback stage and why? I just mentioned that in my own case, I focus on spelling, things that impede communication, but not so much on syntax because these are my grade 8 learners. So what about you? For your taking into account your level, the level of your learners, what type of errors would you focus on? Okay, Kiro says they will pay attention to structure. Marilu says tenses and spelling. Hadi says spelling. Lubna says tenses. Margaret says spelling. Tenses, spelling. Great. So Hadi says grammar. Sadia says expression. So great. Well done. So my advice will be focus on what will suit your learners, taking into account their levels, and make sure you do not discourage them in the process of error correction. Great. So we also need to help learners to write in context because they're not just going to be describing. So what's an example of context activity we could give them? So we could give our learners emojis and then draft a text and ask them to complete maybe one or two missing paragraphs. So in this example, I asked my learners to complete a job application. Yeah, they need to explain why they are the best candidate for the job, and they need to do so using the emojis as clues to express their strengths. And so the application is for the position of a chef. So I start by brainstorming. We started by brainstorming what these emojis could be referring to. And so this is what we came up with. And here's the task. I'd like you to think, when you look at the task, what ideas come to mind? You may not be able to type your answers or full paragraphs, but what ideas do you have? Looking at the emojis and the paragraphs you need to build. So in this example, they needed to write 2 paragraphs. For the first paragraph, they used these 3 emojis, and then the last paragraph, they used the last 4 emojis. Okay. So let's see what learners could write. So in paragraph 1, I'm excited to apply for the position of chef at your restaurant. I have over 5 years of experience as chef with extensive knowledge of different cuisines, including traditional and intercontinental dishes. My unique blend of different spices and flavors leave lasting impressions on clients. Second paragraph, I have good time management and excellent organizational skills, which enable me to prepare and deliver meals in time. I also have experience in catering for large events, and I can work under pressure, delivering to customer satisfaction. So you see how the emojis help them to generate ideas. Now, what do you think are the advantages of providing emojis, the visual clues, in this kind of exercise? Let me see your thoughts in the chat. So Panagiotis says, the emojis guide students. Sadia says, it makes writing easy. Okay. Class says, it will assist the learners. Okay, it makes it attractive. It makes it relatable. Anthony. Okay, Lubna says, tend that it helps grab students' interest in writing. Beatrice says it makes them interested. Dan says it helps them to organize their ideas. So great. Beautiful idea. So what will you do differently? Okay, what will you do differently? Irum says, it will be fun. It will be a fun activity to understand the meaning of difficult words. Yes, I do agree with you, but what will you do differently? Okay, Shakira says, interpretation sometimes wrong. Okay, so maybe check interpretation before they write. Claire says, I will print cards with emojis. Excellent. Joe says, they can use this to practice speaking as well. Then says they will use the speaking practice about feeling and emotions. Great. So I see a lot of speaking practice. Carolina says, I will ask to think about emoji, which has not been invented yet. Great. So let's move on. Also, I mentioned that in my context, learners may be asked to write a conversation in the exam. So we also need to teach them this. So another activity we could do is give learners a set of emojis and ask them to develop a dialogue. Again, I'd like you to think. I'm not really expecting you to type any answers in the chat, but maybe think about a short dialogue you could develop using these emojis. Great. So as you're thinking, let me show you some samples from my classroom. So one student wrote a conversation between Andre and Sophie, where Andre says, Sophie, I'm not interested in the relationship again. Sophie says, why? That's not good. What have I done? I love you. Please don't break my heart. I beg you. And Andre says, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Another student writes a conversation between themselves and their friend, and they say, the friend says, hi, why are you looking very sad? The student says, my mother is very sick. I'm so worried. Her health condition is very bad. I'm afraid. God, please heal my mother. And the friend says, come here. Don't worry. Your mother will be just fine. So what do you think? Do these samples reflect the emojis we just saw? Yeah, Santos says lovely. Ten says yes, they reflect the emojis. Uh, Great, wonderful. Sarah says yes, excellent. Kiloros, yes. Great. So my second question, would your learners enjoy this activity? So Yusuf says yes, they will. They will. Sharon says yes. Heronu says, of course. Panagoti says definitely. So Laura says thumbs up. Muslima says obviously. Great. So let's move on to our fourth unit, which is emoji chain stories. This is where we help spur learners' creativity. And so we get them to write chain stories. So we could start by giving a group of learners an emoji, then they have to write a sentence, end the sentence with an emoji and pass it on to the next group. So I talk of group of learners because I'm very used to large classes, but if you've got very small size classrooms, maybe you want to have one learner write a sentence based on the first emoji and with an emoji and pass it to the next learner. So here's an example, and this is the starting emoji. I'm curious, if you were to begin, what would be your starting sentence for this emoji? Okay, so Zora says, hey, every. Jill says, I'm ready. I love this idea. Okay. Lana says, you write Sinise. Great. Samina says, he's very loud. And then Yin says, yelling. Okay, great. So let's see what my learners wrote. So the first group of learners wrote, I remember the day entrée and sixième results were announced. So entrée and sixième is the exam learners, French medium learners need to take to move from primary into secondary education in my country, because we run both systems of education, English medium and French medium. So those who are in French medium instruction, they need entrée and sixième to move from primary into secondary. So the first group wrote, I remember the day entrée and sixième results were announced, and then they ended with this emoji. If you were to continue, what sentence would you write? So let's see what my learners wrote. I was so worried and afraid because my parents would punish me if I failed. And then they end with this dancing emoji. If you were to continue, what would be your idea? Okay, so the next group says, finally, I got news that I passed. I was so happy. And they end with that emoji. So if you were to continue, okay, Corey says, I passed. Yeah, now they end with this emoji. So if you were to continue, what will you write? I ran home. That's from Anita. So well done. I ran home to tell everyone. Lumna said, I passed. We'll party tonight. Ten says, but I did the best. Okay. So my learners wrote, let's see what my learners wrote. I ran off to announce to my parents that I passed. They were very happy. And they end with the wine bottle. So what will you write to conclude? Oh, Zora says, time to enjoy. Excellent. And Hadi says, then we celebrated together. Well done. So that's what my learners had to say. My parents organized a big party to celebrate my success. You could also ask the first group or the first learner to start off with their own emoji, which means they actually need to think about the emoji and then write something, end with an emoji, and pass it on to the next person or the next group. So again, this is what the first group started with. So they started with the sun. It was sunny that Saturday, and then they ended with this emoji. If you were to continue, what would be your idea? Okay. Two friends went to the park. That's from Anita. Great. Christian Ajem says, my friend and I were talking. Excellent. So let's see. They said, so my friend and I went out to play in the park, and they end with that emoji. How will you continue? Okay, Rema says we played football. Excellent. So let's see what my learners wrote. We played football as usual. Great guess. And then they end with that emoji. So how will you continue? Ajem says, I hurt my knee. Good guess. So suddenly my friend fell and hurt his ankle, and they end with that emoji. How will you continue? Rashana says he cried with pain. Nice. Maria says, I was terrified. Great. So my learners continue by saying he cried because the pain was, because the ankle was really hurting, and they end with that emoji. So how will you move on from there? I was I was rushed to the hospital. That's from Rashana. I ran to fetch the doctor, Rashana, Saira. He was rushed for medical attention. Great. Nice ideas. So again, my learner said, I ran home and called his mother, and they ended with this emoji. And the last group said, she rushed to the scene and carried him to the hospital immediately. So are these activities feasible in your own context? What do you think? Asma says yes, May says yes, Koresh yes, Saira yes. Great, excellent, so wonderful. let's move ahead, please. So for the sake of time, we'll skip the second question and move to Unit 5, which is our last unit. Now you see we've moved the learners from the minimal unit, which is the word, through sentence, paragraphs. Now we need to have them write a full text because in the exams, that's what they need to write, a full text. So how do we help them to build text connection? So a sample activity I would recommend is start by teaching them connector types. So this is an activity I would recommend. Give emojis and then put the connector types and have them link emojis to connector types. So please, I'd like you to take a minute, try to match the emojis to the connector types. And let's see what answers you come up with. Okay. Faculty says A is 3, Rashana A is 3, great. Ahmad A is the third one. Ahmad A is the third one, great. Sharon says B is contrast. Iho says 1 is addition. Beatrice says C is 1, great. I see very nice responses, so for the sake of time, let's move on. So yeah, we've got the emojis and the connector types. So we could take advantage of this to teach them how to use this connector type. So start by generating the connectors, the conjunctions for each of the connector types, and have them use them in sentences first before we think of how they will use them in a whole text. So looking at addition, examples, and having them to use. So addition, contrast, sequence. Once we have done that and they are comfortable using the connectors, then we can proceed to giving them more challenging activities. So you could give them a set of emojis in order and then ask them to use the emojis to write a description, maybe about a process, the process of starting a car, describing their ideal day or cooking food. So yeah, I gave them these emojis and then told them each emoji represents an event, and then they need to use sequence connectors to describe their ideal day based on these emojis. Again, when you look at the task, what ideas come to mind? You do not need to share your answers, but just take maybe 30 seconds to think about what you could write. So this is an example. First, I wake up at 6 a.m. when my alarm rings. Then I get out of bed and open my window. Next, I take my bath and get dressed. After that, I have breakfast and I head off to school where I spend a few hours studying and learning new things. Finally, I return home in the evening, enjoy a nice dinner, and get ready for bed. So for my A1, A2, this will be okay, but for B1, B2, I want them to expand the sentences again a bit. So I will need to bring in a bit of Unit 3. For example, instead of just saying, next I take my bath, maybe say something like, I take my bath while singing my favorite song. Another activity you could give them emojis in this order and then ask them to organize it using their own creativity to write a story. So yeah, I've got a set of emojis and I like my learners to write an adventure story based on these emojis, and they need to remember to use connectors. So again, I'd like you to think of a story you would create using these emojis. You don't need to share anything. Just think and see whether you could come up with something. So here is an example. At the break of dawn, we set off on bikes, eager to explore beautiful trails ahead. As the sun shone brightly, we pedaled faster, feeling the warm rays on our faces. Soon we reached a windy forest path. Surrounded by towering trees and chirping birds, we could see the mountain peak at a distance, challenging us to keep going despite the tiredness. Just as we began to climb, dark clouds rolled in and suddenly rain started pouring down. Without hesitation, we jumped off our bikes and ran for cover. laughing as we dash through the rain. So what other story could you come up with based on the emojis? Now, how will you scaffold the activities in Unit 5? Let's talk a bit about that. How will you scaffold the activities in Unit 5? Okay, Anita says, Anjita says, give them starter sentences. Great, that's wonderful. Rashana says, phrases with bits of content. Excellent. Shakira says, give them a sample, a model. Amazing. Okay. Kiloro says, give them some words. So great. We need to think of how to scaffold based on our learners' level. It's very important. So you might start by giving them a model, and then they go from your model to build their own text. You could give them sentence starters. That will also be lovely. Great. And how will you manage feedback? Okay, and what says, let them work around these emojis in group to be as innovative as possible. Great. And Jita says, do it as a whole class before moving to individual and group. Cheryl says, peer editing. Excellent. Courage says, do it as group work. Well done. John says, feedback based on the level of the learners. Great. Chen says, pair work. Great, wonderful ideas from there. Rashana says, share a rubric so that they can assess themselves. Excellent. So what other activities could we think of? I'm sure we've got many activities to think of, but I see time is not on our side. So great. Now, so points to consider when using emojis in the classroom. If you come from a context like mine where gadgets are not allowed on campus, I would recommend printing the emojis. That's what I did in my own case. So I printed the emojis, brought them to class and used them. Also, screen the emojis such that they serve educational purposes. Especially in contexts where learners are allowed to use their phones in class, you may want to monitor the kinds of images they are exposed to. Ensure that the activities suit learners' level, so don't give them very challenging, go gradually and scaffold. So it's going to take time to plan the activities, but it will be worth the while. So what other points could you think of? What other points are worth considering? So thank you so much for listening. Johanna, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I really, really enjoyed that. We loved that. You can see all the hearts, all the reactions from people, and there was a lot of love in the comments. I don't know if you saw it all, but people saying how useful and interesting it was. So thank you, Anestin.
Thank you, Joanne.
Stop sharing your slides now.
Oh, yeah.
And then people can see us and we can have
Yeah.
a chat. I particularly enjoyed seeing the examples of what exactly you did in class and how your learners responded.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
it's really interesting. Okay, so let's see how many questions we can do. The first question actually I saw from two people. We had Dua in Zoom and Hebda on Facebook asking about age. So could you do this with adults? What age is this best for?
Yeah, really suitable for everyone, adult, teenage, young learners, A1 to B2. So you will just need to choose the activity that is appropriate for your level, for your group of learners and their proficiency level.
Right.
So it's doable. There are variations within the slides.
Okay, that's great. So you can definitely, I can see how you could adapt this for different ages and levels. Why do people love emojis so much?
Yeah, maybe let's say it's the new language of communication. And that's a good question because that was what sparked my curiosity. I live with my younger sister, and at one point, she was just sending me emojis instead of saying hello, good morning, I want this. She will be sending me a set of emojis I could not relate with. And one day it happened while I was at school, so I showed my students. I said, "What sort of writing is this?" And then they told me, "Oh, madam, you don't know. This is a Gen Z style of writing." And I started brainstorming. Oh, is there a
Yeah.
way I could make use of this? Yeah.
I love that. And I love the way the inspiration for all of this came from real life. It's very interesting to hear that little example of how you bring real life into your class with your
Yeah.
students and say, help me with this. I love
Yeah.
it. So you teach
Thank you, Joanna.
youngsters, right? Teenage
Yeah,
learners.
teenagers. Yeah, teenagers. So also a great in this, most of the examples in this slide came from grade 8 learners. Yeah, but I had other activities, more challenging activities with grade 12 and 11.
Okay, so we had a really interesting comment about cultural differences, and somebody pointed out that I think the example they gave was the I see it as like praying hands emoji, but that can
Yeah.
be interpreted in different ways in different cultures. Have you come across that or found that that can be an issue sometimes in class?
Yes, very worth considering. That's why it's important that you have the same that your learners, your group of learners have the same understanding, and cultural issues are worth taking into account. So doing the similarity differences activity actually helped me to see that. So some learners who say, no, this means this one means this, and then we need to come to an agreement because we need to have the same understanding. So that was the reason there for the similarities, differences activity, which I
Yeah.
showed just a small sample of 4, but it was a whole lot.
Yeah, that's great. So that's something to be aware of for people that have got classes with people from different places, different
Yeah.
cultures. But anyway, people have different ideas sometimes about what images mean, right? So it's interesting to
Yeah,
compare.
so if we need to use it as a group, yes, it would be good that we have the same understanding. So it's
Yeah,
worth doing that activity and taking that
yeah,
into account.
yeah, that's fantastic. Well, there are lots of interesting questions and comments, but I'm sorry we are out of time for today. But you will be back, is that
Yeah,
right? You're
yeah,
coming
I will.
to see us on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll share the details of that session. Do you remember the date? I don't have it.
I know it's in 2 weeks. I'm not sure I remember the date,
Okay,
but yeah.
we'll share with everybody the details of all the Q&A sessions, but please come back and ask everything you want to know about using emojis to Anestin on Facebook. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you,
to
John. Thank you.
Wayam, who is on Facebook, and Melissa, who is here behind the scenes moderating in this session. Thank you, everybody. In 15 minutes, after a very short break, we'll be starting the last session of today, which is our panel discussion. And we've got teachers from all over the world sharing ideas for teaching skills in English. So don't go away. We'll see you after a short break. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.